In life, things are rarely certainties. Certainty is a concept that comes through the idea of trust. Trust in oneself, the actions and behaviors of others, or a general status quo that has the odds in its favor, likely based on an examination of previous showings in that respective field. While I often kid at the expense of the anime medium, it is truly a medium I respect. Despite the inherent struggles it faces, being produced in a country where it's unfavorably budgeted based on its small and immediate profitability, the experience it can provide based on its country of origin, and the differences in ideology and direction of its creators because of their Eastern perspective, remains unrivaled. I watch anime because I like to be told stories, and Code Geass happens to be one of the thousands of stories produced by our friends in the East. Now, I obviously do not like Lelouch of the Rebellion. I've made my thoughts on that quite clear, but today we'll be talking about Akito The Exiled, a 5-part OVA which takes place between the end of Lelouch of the Rebellion R1 and the start of R2. Still produced by Sunrise, the studio that gave us Lelouch of the Rebellion, but directed and written by a different person, Akito the Exiled tells the story of an 11 by the name of Akito Hyuga and his life in Europea, which is currently at war with the Holy Britannian Empire. W0 is a secret European unit that fights Britannia in this war, with its soldiers being comprised of 11s who are expendable because of their race. Akito is one of these soldiers, and along with W0's commanding officer, Lelouch, and a group of rebellious 11s they capture, they combat Britannia and its forces, which include some familiar faces. Akito the Exiled is evidently a spin-off, and there's a long list of challenges that come with this categorization which Akito really nails. Among those are thematic and universal assimilation, appropriate reference to original work, timeline consistency, and neutral plot interference. The first hurdle Akito clears is being in the same world as the original story, while in a different location, but containing enough visual elements to where you can believe that it still takes place in the same universe. These elements usually manifest themselves in the form of altering the base design seen in the original series. Throughout Akito, you'll see designs that look familiar to what we've seen before, but changed in either color palette or slightly in pattern to where it's different, but recognizably so. Akito has the benefit of existing in a story that features militaristic elements, so its designs maintain a consistency because of uniforms that further ground and establish these new designs. The same concept applies for the mechs, which have been changed and some entirely new ones created that feel like they could exist in this world, but were just made by different people in-universe, hence the alterations in their designs. Of course, not everything is visual. The music in Akito does a rather incredible job of sounding reminiscent of the original series soundtrack, with its new, nearly dynamic composition and wicked flourish of trumpets and other brass instruments. Story-wise, within those first two OVAs, I really loved how Akito subtly referred to Lelouch of the Rebellion. There was special care to do an appropriate nod to the original series, but not one that overstayed its welcome, because the series does well to remember and respect that Akito does have its own story. Yes, Suzaku and Lelouch are in this, but their appearances and interactions with characters from this story are handled in such a way that they feel natural. The fact that there's a scene where a character exclusive to this work named Shin is in the same room as Suzaku and Lelouch and it didn't feel jarring is a testament to the strength of the direction and the overall design work, because I was actually excited to see how this conversation would play out. Akito the Exiled not only does a tremendous job of establishing itself in the world of Code Geass, but when Akito the Exiled does cross with elements from Lelouch of the Rebellion, they feel like two ships passing in the night. After convincing the audience that Akito is truly a part of this universe, the only thing left to do for such a work is to actually be good. So, how is Akito the Exiled? Well, I can tell you that I really liked it. Akito the Exiled is structured so differently from Lelouch of the Rebellion that it avoids many of the ridiculous plot points and subsequent contrivances stemming from those plot points. Couple that with the direction being light years ahead, and you've got a work where the overall quality never rising above average doesn't detract from my appreciation of its existence. When I sat down to watch the first OVA, I felt a real sense of serenity within the story. Akito Hyuga is a soldier in W0 under the influence of Geass, where the initial command of die has remained in his subconscious since he was given it. He uses this to his advantage in battles, and in the first OVA, he's the only soldier to return to base after all others were killed, or killed themselves in an effort to combat the Britannians by using kamikaze methods. The reason any of this holds any weight, in my opinion, is due to the world building and the direction of this battle. Through the use of CG, we get dynamic camera angles which ground the location where all of this is taking place. It's this consistency, the familiarity of Britannian mechs, and my prior understanding of Geass that allowed me to sit back and enjoy this marvelous encounter in a new world. There's something very genuine about just watching a skirmish in a war like this. After it's over, the Britannian forces retreat, but Akito actually shows you this because it understands that a series is nothing without its world, and its world, like the characters within the context of a political struggle, bleed. While its attention to its world is notable, another of Akito's major strengths lies in its characterization. Akito himself appears initially to be an edgelord loner, but I'd say his outcast reputation makes sense when you consider that his own government wants him to be an expendable kamikaze, and almost everyone else is massively racist towards him. He's keen to this fact and even has some interesting commentary on it, where he states how ridiculous it is that every European believes that every 11 is a swordplay expert or a karate master. Layla Malkal, the commander of the W0 unit, is another fascinating character. Because Akito understands the importance of conversations that don't have to push the plot in order to be significant, she becomes an increasingly interesting and fleshed out character as the series progresses. Layla is an optimist within a government that wants to promote the idea of democracy, but is possibly more racist than Britannia itself. While the people of Europea would rather see 11s die than their own soldiers, Layla fights this notion as much as she can. And even though I don't think her character deserves credit for stifling the ridiculous kamikaze plan her previous commander had, where 11 soldiers would just blow themselves up to combat the Britannians, I do believe she deserves credit for being an attentive character who realizes that treating 11s like garbage isn't the best way to get them on your side. There's also just the simple fact that Layla is a good person, and such a concept goes against her morals. By the end of it all, I truly believed not only that Layla was a character legitimately invested in making a difference for her country and the well-being of 11s, but that she definitely went about this the right way, unlike other characters within this universe who shall not be named. Another thing that Akito understands is that people have pasts. What I mean by that is that prior experiences in our lives mold who we are in present day, and even though for most characters it is thin, the pasts they all have give them some form of character, so when they speak, you know not only where they're coming from with their motives, but who they are as people. Lieutenant Colonel Warwick, for example, is a depraved drunk who betrays W0 to pay for his daughter's medical bills. Again, it's thin, but just the idea that this character has some sort of depth and didn't begin existing when the series did was enough for me to enjoy the presence of the character. Of course, not all of it is thin, and this is where we get to Shin Hyuga shine. Shin is the older brother of Akito and the primary antagonist of the series. Similar to his younger brother, it'd be easy to categorize Shin as an edgelord, and his dialogue certainly reeks of it, but the way Akito is able to flesh out a character who has no right to be this interesting is rather amazing. Shin believes that life is a curse, and with his Geass, he relieves people of this curse by commanding them to kill each other or their loved ones. On the surface, nothing but edge, but because conversations matter, we're able to see how Shin became the person that he is. Shin is someone who rejects the basic concept of trust. He has also lost all faith in humanity. The thing he seems to fear the most is betrayal, which is why he has no emotional connections to anyone, not even Akito. Akito is just a tool in his eyes to continue relieving people of the curse of life. Or is he? Their final scene seems to indicate that even someone this deranged cares about someone. Or perhaps it's because he cares about someone that he's this deranged. Shin and Akito shared the same mother, but not the same father. It's this betrayal from Shin's mother that sparks this homicidal and nearly genocidal path he goes on. After killing his entire family with the exception of Akito, Shin seems to regret this action. Was this the correct path to take? This doesn't matter now, as what's done is done. I believe it's this question haunting him that causes such a distortion in his mind, and it seems to be reflected when he sees all the ghosts of the people he's killed, and then almost kills himself. In addition to having a solid backstory and acceptable motives, it's also nice that even Shin can see through Suzaku's bullshit. And on that note, it's time to talk about the plot of Akito the Exiled. As you already know, the W0 squad fights Britannia for Europea, and all goes well until an operation where Akito comes into contact with his long-lost brother, Shin. That's when everyone becomes ensnared in Shin's plan to essentially destroy the planet. By obliterating Pendragon, the capital of Britannia, and subsequently killing Emperor Charles, the world would erupt into several different wars, and everyone would end up killing everyone, which is Shin's end goal. He plans to do this using an orbital device capable of attacking any place on the planet called Apollo's Chariot. This is not bad in and of itself, maybe even good because it's simple and sets up all appropriate character interactions and motives, but as the story continues, it becomes more and more convoluted with idiotic plot points that don't even affect the final outcome, and eventually even reaching the point of literal deus ex machina. For example, the first hiccup is, to the surprise of no one, the entrance of Suzaku and Lelouch into the story. I was really enjoying Suzaku's existence as a character who barely had any lines and was rarely acknowledged, but I guess that wasn't meant to last. Also, this is not really Lelouch, not mentally anyways. He's been brainwashed into thinking he's a man named Julius Kingsley, a servant of the Emperor who's going to rule over all operations in Euro-Britannia. Now, it isn't Code Geass without one of Lelouch's signature plans, and the plan that Kingsley has is to dominate the Europeans with fear. To do this, he stages the explosion of a power plant and creates a fake terrorist entity called Ark Fleet. This plan later fails when it's discovered that the power plant remains untouched and it was all a hoax. This plan also fails because Shin becomes omniscient and not only deduces that Kingsley is Zero, but that Zero is Lelouch. I guess it's good that Shin wasn't in the original series. Seriously. After Kingsley's plan fails, another plan mounts itself in the form of a character named General Smilus. Smilus tries to force his way into becoming the Emperor of Europe after the Ark Fleet incident by using Layla as a martyr. So that's 3 plans so far, but it doesn't end there. Smilus is contacted by an entity that refers itself to the consciousness of the universe. They tell him that he must kill the man with the perverted Geass, referring, of course, to Shin. But Shin may already be taken care of because, as it turns out, Layla was given a fragment of Geass at a young age when she met C2. During the final battle, time is actually reversed using this Geass fragment, and none of this is explained particularly well, although I do think we at least get the basic gist of it. So much of this was unnecessary. The main issue here is too many fingers in the pie. Shin's plan is easily the most grounded of the few, but Kingsley's and Smilus's feel like white noise, and Kingsley's especially feels unnecessary because it could have been achieved without the involvement of Lelouch and Suzaku. The reversal of time, while proving that I did in fact care about this cast of characters because the scene legitimately shocked me, feels like it's pandering for that exact emotion. Not to mention, the intervention of a god here just feels ridiculous to begin with. The saving grace is that the series doesn't indulge itself with its own absurdities to the point where characters seem like idiots or are purposefully stupid so that other characters can succeed. This is what sets Akito the Exiled apart from Lelouch of the Rebellion. At no point did I feel like the elements of Akito were so artificial that they completely took me out of the story. There's being constructed and there's being contrived. And I can honestly say that Akito never felt like the latter. That's because, I feel, that it's genuine in its attempt to tell a story, and its underlying message didn't really hit me until I was finished, which really says something, I think. Akito the Exiled is ultimately a story about the concept of loss and how we don't have to be alone in this world. We don't know what we've lost until it's gone, but finding something new is a task we should consider important, as it can drastically change our views on life and our perception of other people. Shin distanced himself from others, but at the end was satisfied with his decision to accept love from another person. Akito, a loner at the beginning, is shown at the end having accepted the concept of friendship and, as it appears, even love also. He didn't fight Shin alone, and although tangled, the idea behind his friends helping him does cement progression of all the characters from distrustful, pessimistic rebels to a cohesive unit of comrades willing to put their lives on the line for each other. I can't help but respect such a message for just its concept, but also because it doesn't go about telling it in a hysterically amateur fashion. It's prompt in showing how characters can become apathetic to a world and its people, the effects of being a cynic from a young age, and how bleak that outlook can become as an adult, and how to go about fixing such an issue. Couple this with the series' competent direction, respect for its universe as a whole, and despite its blatant story issues, Code Geass Akito the Exiled gets the final rating of... Well, I'm not really sure I have a rating for Akito the Exiled. As you can tell, I actually liked this one a lot, even if I didn't think it was great. And that's because nothing in life is certain. The certainty of me hating this just because it has Code Geass in its name is about as preposterous as the certainty that just because this video has the word hate in its title, that I would go on a totally irrational rant about it. I feel like it's very important to now say that not everything is black and white. I've been seeing a whole bunch of that as of late, and I'd like to remind everyone that every critique in existence doesn't have to come down to loving or hating something. Sometimes people are in between or at varying opinions of quality, and that's perfectly fine. By the same token, we should be perceptive to all opinions, not just ruling one out because we don't agree with it or because we perceive it to offend us. At the end of the day, insults against one another don't move discussion along or help us understand works any better. The more time talking about why we like or dislike something and not why we dislike the person saying they like or dislike something, the better. Of course, this begins with having a general respect for the people you're talking to, something which everyone has problems with at times. It's finding that respect and opening your mind to other opinions that I think will help us all move along in the future. Thanks for watching, and to Akito, thanks for existing. Akito the Exiled is structured so differently from Lelouch of the Rebellion. Why is it so hard to pronounce that today? Lelouch of the Rebel.